What if the one trip you saved for your entire life, the journey you believed would finally bring you peace, became the doorway to the greatest betrayal you would ever face? Tonight, you will hear true story of a 53-year-old Filipina woman who traveled alone to Australia, chasing rest, freedom, and a second chance at happiness. But what followed shattered her trust, emptied her savings, and nearly destroyed her sense of reality. This story involves love that felt real, help that seemed genuine, money that vanished without warning, and a secret that crossed borders. And here's the frightening part. Everything looked normal at first. As you listen, I want you to play investigator with me. Pay attention to every small detail, every word, every premise, because somewhere in history, a lie hides in plain sight. This case is drawn from documented real-life scam patterns that affect thousands of women around the world every year, and by the end, you may realize how close this danger could be to someone you love here, even to you. Now, listen closely, because what happened next was something no one saw coming. Her name was Marisol Reyes, 53 years old, born and raised in the Philippines. For more than 30 years, she worked as a nurse, moving from on a hospital ward to another, one exhausted night shift to the next. While others rested, she stayed awake beside the sick. While others celebrated, she stayed behind to care for someone else's pain. Marisol was a widow. Her husband had died years earlier from a sudden illness. Since then, her life became one long routine of duty, work, home, bills, silence. Her 2 children had grown and built lives of their own overseas. They called when they could. They visited when schedules allowed, but most nights Marisol ate alone. She never complained. She told herself this was what strength looked like. But inside, something was fading. After decades of caregiving, her body grew tired. After decades of giving, her heart felt empty. Then burnout came quietly. Sleepless nights, heavy thoughts, the feeling that life was passing her by while she stood still. One evening, after a long shift, Marisol sat alone in her small apartment and stared at her reflection in the dark window. For the first time, she asked herself a question she had avoided for years. Is this really all my life will ever be? That night, she opened her phone and searched for places she hadn't seen in movies. Blue skies, open waters, quiet beaches. Her eyes stopped in Australia. Safe, beautiful, far away from everything that reminded her of exhaustion. She told herself this would not be an escape. It would be healing. Airward for a lifetime of sacrifice. Still, fear held her back. She had never traveled alone, never crossed an ocean by herself, never chosen herself over everyone else. For days, she wrestled with the decision. Sleep became difficult. Her thoughts bounced between excitement and doubt. Then one morning, just before a hospital shift, she did it. She tapped the screen. She booked the ticket. When the confirmation email arrived, her hands shook, her heart raced. She felt hope and fear. At the same time, Marisol told no one at first. Not her co-workers, not even her children. This was her secret promise to herself. For the first time in decades, she was choosing her own life. When Marisol arrived in Australia, the first thing that struck her was the light. The sky was wide and clear. The air smelled of salt and ocean wind. Everything felt open, calm, and new. Her resort sat along a quiet stretch of coast just outside the city. White buildings lined with glass balconies. Palm trees swayed gently in the breeze. The sound of waves rolled in steady and soft like slow breathing. For the first time in years, no hospital alarms echoed in her ears. No rushing, no urgency, only stillness. Staff greeted her with easy smiles. Other guests walked past in light clothes, holding drinks, laughing freely. This kind of comfort felt unfamiliar. To her, almost undeserved. That afternoon, while checking in at the front desk, she struggled with a small issue. Her room key would not activate. She stood there quietly, not wanting to cause a scene. That was when a man stepped forward. He introduced himself as Daniel Moore, a hospitality consultant who worked closely with their resort's management. He spoke in a calm, steady voice. He apologized for Thedele as if the problem were his fault. Within moments, he fixed the issue and personally walked her to her room. You've traveled a long way, he said gently. You shouldn't be worrying about small problems on your first day. His manner surprised her. It wasn't flirtatious. It wasn't forced. It was simply kind. When he learned she was from the Philippines, his face brightened. "My mother lived in Manila for years," he said. "She always said, Filipinos carry quiet strength." I see it now. That sentence stayed with her longer than she expected. Over the next few days, their paths crossed often, but never in a way that felt planned. At breakfast in the lobby, once near the pool each time, Daniel was the same. Polite, respectful, attentive. He never invaded her space, never rushed conversion. He listened when she spoke, asked thoughtful questions instead of prying ones. He talked about this year's working in Southeast Asia, about community projects he'd been part of, about how much he admired the warmth of Filipino families. His tone was humble, educated, measured. To Marisol, he seemed different from other men she had known. No loud promises, no exaggerated charm, just calm presence. Still, inside her, a quiet warning lived. She reminded herself she was alone in a foreign country. She reminded herself not to trust too quickly. But another voice whispered something she had not heard in years. "You are being noticed. You are being seen." That feeling unsettled her and warmed her at the same time. For the first time since her husband died, someone looked at her not as a caretaker, not as a nurse, not as a tired widow, but as a woman, and that was the beginning of her confusion. After that first meeting, Daniel seemed to appear everywhere Marisol went, at breakfast terrace, near the elevators, along the coastal walkway at sunset. Each encounter felt accidental to accidental. He would smile gently and say things like, "Funny how we keep running into each other." Marisol let it off at first, but a quiet part of her began to notice the pattern. Soon those brief greetings turned into shared meals at the cafe near the water, then into long walks along the shore as evening fell, then into quiet city drives where Daniel showed her hidden lookouts and calm streets away from tourists. He listened to her stories without interrupting her years in the hospital, her husband's sudden death, the nights she cried alone in silence, and when she finished, he surprised her. He spoke of his own losses, a broken engagement, a failed business. Years spent trying to rebuild a life that collapsed without warning. Their pain matched in shape, if not in detail, and in that sameness, a closeness formed. They talked about regrets, dreams they never chased, the lives they imagined in younger years. For Marisol, it felt like opening a door she had locked decades ago. Soon, their connection moved beyond meetings at the resort. Her phone began to light up each morning with good day messages, then voice notes during her afternoon rest, then late night calls that stretched into the early hours. Daniel's words were gentle, carefully chosen, always supportive. "You carried everyone for so long," he told her softly one night. "Who is carrying you now?" That question stayed with her slowly, without noticing when it began. Emotional dependence settled in. She started checking her phone first thing in the morning, waiting for his messages, measuring her mood by his tone. To the listener, to you, the pacino feels uncomfortable, too fast, too intense, too much, too soon. And yet to Marisol, it felt natural, comforting, long overdue. Then came the first warning sign. One evening, she casually suggested meeting someone from his life, a colleague, a friend, anyone. Danielle smiled but didn't answer directly. Another time, she asked about visiting his home or office. He changed the subject smoothly. Each time there was a reason, a delay, an excuse, always spotlight, always calm, always distant when it mattered most. Marisol noticed it, but she pushed the thought aside, because when a person has been alone for years, they do not question warmth easily. The shift in Daniel's tone came quietly, no warning, no announcement. One evening, during one of their usual calls, his voice sounded different, slower, heavy, distracted. He tried to towel it off at first, but Marisol could hear the strain beneath the words. After a long pause, he finally spoke. "My father is in trouble," he said softly. "A sudden medical issue. He collapsed at work. They rushed him to a private hospital." Marisol felt her chest tighten. Daniel explained that his father had no proper coverage for urgent treatment. The hospital demanded payment before continuing tests. The amount was too high for quick access. His voice cracked as he spoke, but he never once asked her for help. In fact, he did the opposite. "I'll find a way," he said. "I always do. I just needed to talk to someone tonight." His refusal to ask made it feel real, made it feel honest. The next day, he sent a short voice message. His words were slow, tired. They might transfer him to another facility if that payment doesn't come soon. Still, no request. Marisol barely slept that night. Images of her own husband in a hospital bed rushed back to her. The long nights, the fear, the machines, the helpless waiting. She remembered how it felt to be desperate for time, for answers, for mercy. By morning, she had made up her mind. During their next call, she brought it up. "Daniel, how much is it?" she asked quietly. He went silent. "No, Marisol, I can't take money from you," he replied. "You've already given me so much just by being here." But she pressed. "You taught me to speak honestly," she said. "Let me help, please." He resisted again. Then again. Finally, after long hesitation, he gave her the amount. Not outrageously large, just enough to feel reasonable and urgent. Her hands trembled as she opened her banking app. She told herself it was temporary. She told herself, people in love help each other. The first transfer left her account that afternoon. Minutes later, her phone rang. Daniel was crying. Not softly, not dramatically, but in a broken, breathless way that sounded real. "I didn't know how to thank you," he said. "You don't understand what this means, Tom, to my family. One day, I will repay everything. I swear it. This is just the beginning of our life. Together." He spoke about the future with ease. Trips they would take, a home they could build, a life where neither of them would be alone again. Marisol listened in silence, her chest filled with fear and relief at the same time. To her, it felt like kindness. To the viewer, the tension has now entered the room. After the first transfer, nothing felt the same again. A pattern quietly settled into Marisol's life. It always followed with the same order. First came a new crisis, then emotional closeness, then money, and finally love spoken with urgency and promise. At first, the gaps between urgencies were wide, weeks apart, then days. Soon they came without warning. Daniel sent photos from hospital riders, beds, monitors, dim rooms with tired faces in the background. Then came documents that looked official, typed reports, stamped papers, invoice with totals circled in red. Each message expressed a different fear. Another specialist needed payment. A medical supplier refused to release equipment with a deposit. A follow-up treatment could not wait. Every request was framed carefully, never as a demand, always as a burden he was ashamed to share. "You didn't have to do this," he would say. "You've already done too much. I don't want to lose your respect." Those words worked better than pressure ever could. Marisol sent more transfers, not always immediately. Sometimes she hesitated, counted the remaining balance in her savings, questioned herself. But every delay ended the same way, with fear. Fear of losing him. Fear of watching another loved one suffer while she stood helpless again. Fear of regret. She began to hide the truth. When her daughter asked why she sounded tired, Marisol changed the subject. When her son asked about her finances, she let it off. She told herself it was temporary. She told herself it was nobody's business. Inside her, the war grew louder. One part of her whispered that something felt wrong. The timing, the repetition, the way every emergency seemed to appear just as calm returned. Another part of her panicked at the thought of doubt. If I question him, I might lose him. If I lose him, I will be alone again. When her sister finally spoke with blunt concern, Marisol snapped. "Stop judging what you don't understand," she said sharply. "You don't know what we share. You don't hear his voice at night when he feels like giving up." Her defense stunned even herself. And slowly, without noticing when it happened, Marisol stood alone. Inside her own life, she no longer shared her worries. She silenced her doubts. She stopped listening to voices that once guided her. All that remained was Daniel's voice in her ear and the growing weight in her chest. The doubt began with something small, so small it almost slipped past her. During one of Daniel's late-night calls, he mentioned the name of the hospital again. Marisol had heard it before, but this time, something about it felt off. Later that night, unable to sleep, she typed the hospital name into her phone. Nothing came up. She tried different spellings. Still nothing. Her chest tightened. The next morning, Daniel sent another hospital photo. His father's hand on a bed, a drip line visible at the wrist, flowers on a metal table beside him. Marisol stared at the image, longer than usual. Then she pressed and held the screen. She selected reverse imaga search. What appeared next made her hands shake. The same photo, not one time, not two, but on medical stock websites, on health blogs, on unrelated news articles from different countries. Her throat went dry. She began searching phrases Daniel often used, exact lines from his messages, words she believed were private to their relationship. What she found crushed every remaining piece of hope. Story after story appeared. Different women, different countries, same pattern, a sick parent, urgent payments, hospital photos, promises of a future, money gone. Her breathing grew shallow. She scrolled for hours, forum posts, police warnings, victim testimonies. Every sentence felt like it had been stolen from her own life. Herman rejected it at first. This can't be real. This can't be him. There must be a mistake. But the evidence kept stacking. Dates matched, methods matched, even theft phrases were the same. Marisol pushed it back from the table and rushed to the bathroom. Her stomach turned. Her body shook. She leaned over the sink, fighting nausea. Tears came without warning. She slid down against the wall and sat on the cold floor, her phone still glowing. In her hand, her chest hurt. Her hands trembled so badly she could barely type. Months of messagesno read differently. Every I miss you, every trust me, every promise. All of it felt staged, planned, used. Her phone began to vibrate. Daniel was calling us, twice again. The screen lit up over and over with his name. She stared at it through blurred vision. And then she turned the phone face down. 4 hours, Marisol stared at her phone insolence. Her heart pounded. Her hands were cold. Then she did what she had been avoiding all night. She called him. Daniel answered on the second ring, his voice warm and familiar. Marisol, I was worried. Why didn't you answer earlier? Her voice shook, but she kept it steady. Daniel, I searched the hospital you mentioned. It doesn't exist. There was a brief pause. Then his tone changed. You're tired, he said calmly. You're a confusing things. She pressed on. I searched the photo you sent. It appears in medical websites in other countries. Silence again. Then irritation crept into his voice. Why are you spying on me? He asked, after everything I've shared with you. She felt her chest tighten. Because too many things don't add up. That was when the warmth disappeared completely. He accused her of not trusting him, of turning against them when he needed her most, of causing stress that could make his father's condition worse. If something happens to him because of this pressure, he said slowly, how will you live with that? Few weight of his words crushed her. She felt the familiar pull to apologize, to retreat, to doubt herself again. But this time, the evidence stood between them. I know the truth, she said quietly. I have seen the reports. I have read the stories. You used the same photos, the same words, the same lies. His response came sharp and fast. You've destroyed everything, he said. I thought you were different. Then the line went dead. Marisol tried to call back. No, sir. She sent a message, 1 check mark. Then nothing. Minutes later, she tried again. This time the message did not deliver. She checked his profile. Gone. She tried his email. No reply. Another number he once used. Disconnected. Within an hour, every path to him had vanished. His voice, his promises, his future plans, all erased. Marisol sat alone in her apartment, staring at the empty screen. The truth settled in slowly. There had never been a Daniel. There had never been a shared future. There had only been a story written for her and sold to her piece by piece. And now, with a single silence, the illusion collapsed completely. The next morning, Marisol walked into a police station with trembling hands and a folder filled with screenshots, bank records, and messages. Her voice broke as she explained everything from the beginning. The officer listened quietly, nodding. As she spoke, then came few words that changed everything. You are not the first. The officer told her that hundreds of women across different countries had reported nearly the same experience, same pattern, same emotional setup, same financial trap, different names, different faces, same results. It wasn't one mistake. It was a system. Weeks later, Marisol attended her first support group meeting in a small community center. The room was quiet at first. Then one woman began to speak. She was from Canada. Another woman followed from Singapore. Then one from New Zealand. Different accents, different ages, different lives. But when they describe how their relationships began, the words felt identical. A kind man. A sudden crisis, hospital photos, requests wrapped in chum, promises of forever. One woman pulled out her phone and placed it on the table. "This is him," she said. Marisol leaned forward. Her breath caught. It was the same face, only the name was different. In that moment, that truth became impossible to deny. This was not romance gone wrong. This was organized crime built on emotional control. Women who had never met each other before began to cry together, not only from loss, but from recognition. Anger surfaced, shame lifted, strength returned. For the first time since Daniel vanished, Marisol felt something she had not felt in months. She was no longer alone. What began as one woman's report soon crossed borders. Investigators from multiple countries started sharing files. Bank trails were followed. Phone records were traced. Online accounts were linked. Each new victim added another piece to the same puzzle. Slowly, a network emerged. When the story finally reached the media, everything changed. News outlets reported on the growing number of cases. Families recognized faces. More victims stepped forward. Then one morning, Marisol received a call. "They have him," the officer said. The arrest happened quietly. No cameras, no dramatic chase. Just a door opened and a man in handcuffs walked out. Weeks later, Kameth courtroom. Marisol sat with other women in silent rows. Some held documents, some held tissues. All held the same quiet tension. The man stood before the judge with a different expression than the one he once used to promise love. No warmth, no softness, only a blank stare. The evidence filled hours of testimony, transfers, false documents, multiple identities. Dozens of victims. When the judge finally spoke, the room went still. The ruling confirmed what the women already knew. This had been planned fraud, not a misunderstanding, not failed romance, a deliberate crime built on trust and lies. Some funds were ordered returned. Some sentences were passed, but no every loss could be recovered. The women felt something complicated in that moment. Relief mixed with grief. Justice had spoken. But time could not be reversed. The money did not fully return. Some savings were gone forever. Plans she once made quietly disappeared with it. And trust was no longer easy. Marisol became careful with every conversation, every promise, every warm word from a stranger. But something else began to change. She reached out to her children and told them everything for the first time. Not the edited version, not the brave version, the full truth. There were tears, there was anger, there was guilt, but there was also forgiveness. Her family drew closer than they had in years, not through strength alone, but through honesty. Slowly, Marisol learned to sit with her pain instead of hiding it. She learned that being strong did not mean being silent. She learned that asking for help did not make her weak. Soon, she began attending every support meeting. Then she started staying back after each session, listening to new victims, holding their hands while their stories broke apart. One day a counselor asked her, "Would you like to help us guide the next group?" She hesitated. Then she said, "Yes." Marisol did not become fearless, but she became steady. Her pain found direction. Her loss found meaning. The experience that nearly destroyed her became the reason another woman would not fall into the same trap. If you are listening to this right now while feeling lonely, if grief still visits you at night, if part of your heart is still hoping to be seen, chosen, and loved, then this story is speaking directly to you. Because the people who cause the deepest harm do not always serve with harsh words or threats. They do not always look dangerous. They often narrate with gentle voices, patient listening, and soft promises. They look and they sound careful. They feel safe at first. The warning signs rarely begin with fear. They begin with comfort that comes too quickly, with closeness that skips time, with affection that settles in before trust has had space to grow. Then comes urgency, a crisis that cannot wait, a problem that only you seem able to solve. Then distance from the people who will love you most, not by force, but by quiet separation. And before you realize what is happening, you are no longer choosing freely, you are reacting. This is not about intelligence. This is not about age. This is not about weakness. This is about human need. The need to feel valued. The need to feel needed. The need to feel less alone. And that need is never wrong, but it must be protected. Because love should never arrive with pressure. Care should never demonstrate secrecy. And anyone who truly wants a future with you will never need to hide you from the rest of your world. You might think this story ends with an arrest. You might think this is where the danger stops. It doesn't. Months after the trial, new reports surfaced. Different countries, different names, same methods. The man who targeted Marisol did not work alone. Others like him are still active right now using new identities, new photos, new stories, and same emotional traps. These scams don't stop. They only change faces. And somewhere at this very moment, another lonely heart is being studied. Another story is being written. Another lie is being sent. That is why this story cannot end in silence. Share this story. Protect someone you love. Subscribe so more people can be warned, because awareness is the only shield many people have. And remember this, she traveled looking for peace and barely escaped with her life intact.